I was practicing law. I was doing divorce cases. And my best friend was my neighbor. He was a state's attorney. And we had all of our neighbors were traders at the SIBO. And all of these guys were hitting the bars at 3 o'clock every afternoon. They had fancy cars and great vacations. And my best friend and I realized that we were doing something wrong. I saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal to come to the Board of Trade on a permit to trade Ginnie Maes, $250 a quarter. This is my badge, and that was the start of my career 40 years ago. I have a Bachelor of Science in Accountancy. I'm a CPA. I am a Juris Doctor, and I'm admitted to practice law in the state of Illinois, the Northern District of Illinois, Seventh Circuit, all the usual stuff. I'm an expert witness, so as not to compete with other attorneys, because those are the people who primarily hire me. I do not practice law. I simply act as an expert witness in futures and derivatives cases. And I also am the author and subject matter expert for exchange analytics. I write all the training programs that are used throughout the futures industry. I started out, as I say, on a permit that was $250 a quarter. My next seat was an AM, associate membership at the Chicago Board of Trade, and I leased that for many years. The first seat that I bought was a commodity option membership, and that would have been around 1981 or so. And I borrowed $15,000 from my friend and put down the other $15,000 myself. And I paid my friend off, $500 a month for a couple of years. Since then, I've owned numerous comms, AMs, items, IOMs at the Merck. Right now, I only own 2 seats, this item and this comm. For the 20 years that I was on the floor, I had a bad back. I mean, it was just a constant thing. You stand in a square foot 7 hours a day, hardly ever moving, and it's really difficult. And that was the main thing that took its toll, was my back. I would just go home every night, feel pretty sore. Good night's rest, I came back and did it the next day. My first wife and my second wife both recognized that this was my livelihood, and they had to get with that program. They understood it meant getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and probably going to bed before before the news comes on every night, but they accepted it. As an independent trader, I was free to come and go as I pleased. I didn't account to anybody. I was solely responsible to myself for my actions. If I didn't feel like going to work, I didn't have to, but I loved what I was doing and I couldn't wait to get here every morning. It was just a great feeling. In my former career as an attorney, I can't say I really felt that way, especially because I was doing divorce law, and it's the black hole of the legal profession. I mean, you never run into anybody who's happy in the divorce business. So going to the Board of Trade was a very positive thing for me. Enormous, because everything was all new. Financial futures were new in the late 70s and early 80s. My next stop after the bond pit was bond options, which were brand new, and nobody knew what they were doing. So there was really some opportunity there. I traded options for 5 years, and I did pretty well. Once again, it's one of those things that if I knew now what I knew then, I could have done much better, but be that as it may, the opportunities were great. And then when the exchange started initiating new contracts, there was also great opportunity, also great risk, but there was great opportunity. When you had a great day on the floor, it really felt good. And I know that sounds rather mercenary, but it's the truth. Some days everything worked for you, and those were wonderful times. But I enjoyed the camaraderie. You're with the same guys every day, all day long. You'd think you'd learn to hate them, but you didn't. I mean, you either respected them, you made friends, you got along with people. It was just a great life. That was the best part about it, was the people and the feeling of success. Filling paper, I also had days when I would fill 7,000 or 8,000 contracts or something like that. And, at the end of the day, and you have a stack of cards this big, it was a pretty good feeling. In October of 1987, everybody thinks about a stock market crash, but simultaneously we had a bond market melt-up. 30-year treasuries at the Board of Trade were trading around 70. when the stock market crashed. There was a like-kind contract trading in London. It opened up at 105, a 50% jump, $35,000 on a one lot during the crash. And here at the Board of Trade, we had limits, so we never traded. The market would open up limit bid every day, no trade. And I was caught short, and I lost a boatload of money in 1987. Those were my worst days. I actually had two worst errors, and one of them was a very good thing, as it turned out. I actually made money because I forgot to give somebody a fill. I ended up with more cards than I had paper. And I ended up making about $30,000. And I went to OIA and I said, what do I do with this? I don't even know who it would go to. So that was a very good thing. They said, it's yours. If you have no customer for it, it's your fill. So enjoy. When my wife was sick, I missed a lot of time. I wasn't in the pit. And I would get phone calls from my clerks who were handing off my orders to other brokers and say, Mark, I screwed up. You owe so-and-so $10,000. Those were my worst. When I first started, we were in the midst of very high interest rates and very volatile markets. This was the end of the Jimmy Carter era, and we had interest rates that are inconceivable today. Treasury bonds, 11, 12%. Mortgages were 15, 18% mortgages. It was just kind of crazy. Those were very difficult days to trade. Markets were extremely volatile, and you'd have days where the bonds would be up limit, then down limit, and then close up limit. And it was just craziness. After I stopped trading and became a broker, things were a little bit more sane for me, but the worst days were the days when there were Fed meetings and Fed announcements. Those became very difficult. 1 o'clock, 1:10 in the afternoon on a Fed day, all hell would break loose. Nothing would happen all day, and then all hell would break loose. Those were very difficult days too. To my knowledge, the first futures options that traded were bond options in 1981. Don't hold me to the date. And I went into that pit, and nobody knew how to trade bond options. We all read a book called Options as a Strategic Investment by Lawrence McMillan, but that was, of course, about stock options. And you had to add dividends into the equation, and obviously it wasn't relevant to futures. We learned by doing. I had a friend, David Williams. David had a computer and on the floor, and it required you to load the operating system on a 5-inch floppy disk, and then you could run his program for theoretical values for your options. And I shared that computer with him and a couple other guys, and we just did what we thought was right. We took the market as it came and hoped for the best. Market openings in the Fed funds pit were pretty straightforward. The market didn't really move all that much on the opening, unlike the bond pit. The Fed funds were pretty stable, so it wasn't a big deal. I remember the openings in the bond pit being quite volatile. You just never knew. You had a little indication from what was going on in London, but other than that, you never really knew what was going to happen. I was stuck with trades I didn't want all the time, and you just did the best you could. If you needed to get something off in the bonds, you could go into the mid-am and lay them off there. After the FBI offense, they did have a post-close where you could get out of something. You know what I'm talking about. So it was only an issue, I guess, in the 80s. But even then, you could go to the mid-am and get out of something. Working the brokers, or at least establishing rapport with people in the pit, was extremely important. And this was an unusual environment at the Board of Trade. A lot of the people were Southsiders, which I was also, and a lot of them were Irish, which I was not. And the big topic was always high school football and children and beer and things like that. Not things that I was especially interested in, but that's what I did. I tried to establish a rapport with all the people I worked with, and I will tell you, they were great guys. I never worked with better people in my life than the people on the trading floor. They relied on me more than I had to rely on them because I was their livelihood. There weren't that many brokers. There were a handful of locals. In the Fed funds pit, after it shook out, we were left with 3 brokers and maybe 7 or 8 locals. And we were all pretty good friends. So it was, we looked after each other. If I had, my attention was distracted somewhere else and an order came in, somebody would tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, so-and-so got an order in this, or something like that. So it was a mutual thing. We were all working together to make this a successful venture and to make money. As I said before, I like the people I work with. I don't know of any more honest and honorable people than the people I traded with on the trading floor. I don't think that people thought at the time that evening up 30 seconds after the bell rang was a crime. I don't think people really thought anything about it at the time. And I would say that was pretty much the worst thing I saw, other than those actual criminal events like Daryl Zimmerman, who came down, and there was another fellow who put on a disguise and things like that. Those were pretty bad. But things that traders did, I didn't really see anything like that, although I did hear about a few things. Yeah. There was one fellow named Charlie D. I don't know if that means anything to you. One of the classiest human beings that ever walked the face of the earth. And he would sort of welcome, and this is probably something that's not kosher, but Charlie won't mind. You'd walk into the pit and he'd say to the new guy, he said, what's your market? And he'd say, well, I'm 4 bid at 6. And he'd say, I'll sell you 5 at 4. Now what's your market? He'd say, 4 bid at 5. He'd say, I'll buy 5 at 5. And he put $150 in your pocket, and welcome to the pit. But I did see people, that had really hard times, and I did see other people, locals and brokers, who helped them out whenever they could. I would say, in general, people at the CBOT did not like or respect the people at the CME. I don't really know why. It wasn't a direct competition until, for me, it became a direct competition. Fed funds was the first short-term interest rate contract that the Board of Trade had. Prior to that, the CME felt that they owned the short end of the curve and the board owned the long end of the curve. Well, we had this 30-day Fed funds contract, and they didn't like it. So they put up a 1-month LIBOR contract, and they constructed it very much like their 3-month LIBOR, Eurodollar contract. Well, we prevailed. We went head-to-head for a year or so. Their contract died out. Fed funds at the Board of Trade managed to survive, and I won't say I thought any less of those people, but I really was not happy with the CME for a long time. Bert was involved in trying to develop an electronic trading platform for the Board of Trade, and his conception involved having icons of people in a simulated pit who could actually trade across the pit with each other. Terrible idea. But ever since there was electronic trading, I have been a trader. Even when my firm did not have electronic trading, they allowed me to open up an account at MF Global, who did have, or EDF Man, who did have electronic trading capabilities. And I would guess I was a pretty early adopter of computers and electronic trading. If I could start over, knowing what I know now, I would be really rich. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Trading on the floor is a combination of things. It's not just speed of your brain. It's a matter of sensing what's going on around you. It's a matter of relationships, and that might be even more important than anything else. I know today better how to manage relationships and gather information and act on them than I did when I was a 30-year-old. I was never a great trader. I was at best a mediocre trader. Knowing what I know now, I probably could have been a very good trader.